When I ask players what their least favorite map in Marvel Rivals is, it tends to be two answers. Number one, the original Klyntar map, the symbiotic surface, and number two, Odin's Archive, the Asgard map that's specifically indoors. So when this map came out, which was effectively a combination of the domination playstyle that is in Asgard, as well as the symbiotic map changing that was Klyntar, I was concerned. But then as I began to study this map, I realized that the devs had learned a lesson. Today, I'm going to take a look at the details and design principles that are in the new Klyntar Celestial Husk map, so that you can get both an appreciation as well as a head start on how to best approach this map. There's lots of really unusual and really smart decisions that are made here. On the unusual side of things, take a look at this random red translucent cube. Somebody who makes maps might be able to tell me what this is. I have no idea. Let's do a quick fly through of this map so you can get an idea of how the general flow of this map would be. So you can see here, obviously, the map is designed to be mirrored, sort of required for domination maps, but that does mean that every single design decision that's correct or every single design decision that's incorrect is going to be duplicated. So we're going to have to be twice as critical. You can take a look at each of these spawn rooms here. The first one that we start in is on the Phoenix side of the map, which has these really cool looking fire-based weapons, as well as obviously her quill in the background here, and some interactable pieces of lore that we'll have to come back to when we're actually able to get boots on the ground. The very first decision that I've noticed that is a smart improvement from both of the previous less liked maps is the automatic deployment of the symbiotic elevators. On the original Klyntar map, these are not deployed by default, forcing players to have to shoot them in order to make something happen, which I think works okay for that map, but I think players sometimes forget that they're there, and it's very easy to simply overlook them or have them deploy by accident. Whereas on this map, they're deployed by default, activated by default, showing players the paths that are available to them. There's also some interesting and unusual uses of the walls here, as you'll see that the design of this map is much less likely to try to cut you off, something that I think some players get a little frustrated with on the original Klyntar map, and instead these are more just simply optional offshoots as ways of getting in and around the map, rather than being something that can completely disrupt the flow. But as we're looking around, one of the very first things I noticed that is clearly out of bounds and not intended for us to see is this weird underground pod. Spoiler alert, I come back through here with a character that can actually break stuff, and this doesn't. It's just here, and I don't know why. It doesn't need to be here. It's definitely odd. Obviously, if we're going to be on a map themed around where Venom got his powers, there's going to be a lot of symbiotic or otherwise tendril forward stuff that makes me uncomfortable, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. But now let's turn our attention to the main arena, at least for this first area, the first map zone. This is your central battle point, and what you'll notice is how many entry points there are to this map. One of the major points of contention for some of the other maps is how funneled some of these areas can be, forcing teammates to just force through their way in order to actually get to the point, which if a team is already winning can feel really, really bad. But this map seems to be more designed around teams spreading out. We're going to see as we look at the rest of the maps as a consistent theme. You'll see that there are 6 main entry points, both on high ground and on low ground, giving teams lots of options in order to reach them. And the nice thing is that they're not super far away from each other either. All of them are a quick jaunt from your spawn point, meaning that it's just as likely that you and your team might go low as it is you and your team might go high, forcing the enemy team to be more reactive to you and making the game what I hope will be much more interesting. The longest lines of sight are on the low ground, making the defending team have a slightly better advantage, but that does give the offensive team, the one that's trying to take the point, more opportunities to find different lines of sight in order to apply pressure. You'll start to see that this map is sort of designed around Phoenix's kit, as she does a very good job in these narrow hallways, funneling damage in on teams, but also is not afraid to stretch her wings to get to areas that other people can't reach, while also having a bit of range on her. I also like that the outside of this map actually looks reasonable. Sometimes when we look up high on certain maps, it doesn't really make sense, but this building actually seems like it would exist in some futuristic or sci-fi world. It's not just nothingness up here. There's actually some stuff up here. Coming back through with an actual character, in this case Phoenix, and trying to look through the destructible terrain, you'll see that the map doesn't change all that much. I think a major point of complaints for some of the other maps, and in particular maps like Odin's Archive, as well as a lot of Hell's Heaven, is that the map feels a little unfair as it changes around you. Well, while this map still feels alive and the destructible terrain does breathe life into the overall engagements, it doesn't massively affect the balance of the map, meaning that this is going to stay a lot more consistent, which to me feels like they're listening to the feedback of players. So that's point one. Let's move on to point two. You'll start to notice something odd, something that we saw from the first map more present here. This map is designed to be more spread out. All of these lanes are designed to encourage pockets of combat. It almost feels like a MOBA in terms of its design, as each of these sort of bleed into each other, but they're definitely separated by some different changes in elevation, again, forcing more of an open battlefield playstyle rather than funneling your team all through one point. And I think that this map might be the contender, if not the absolute champion, of the closest health packs in the game. I can't think of any other map where I'm able to see 2 to 3 health packs separated by like maybe 10 meters, 15 meters. It's going to be much easier to take lower healing teams through here because there's just so many health packs available to you. In fact, everything seems close. The only thing that is sparse and spread out is multiple pieces of high ground where players can take different lines of sight in, encouraging longer ranged playstyles. This is a trend that we saw with our previous video with Arako. There's a lot of high ground that isn't accessible unless you use a movement ability, an extra cost onto a, let's say, a brawl or a dive type player to actually deal with the longer ranged characters. Even if you are a brawler or a diver, you still have this low ground that allows you alternate flanking routes in on the other team. I also just like maps that do this kind of thing, where you could be fighting one fight above and directly below you is another fight breaking out, making the map feel a lot more intimate, but maybe that's just me. As we take our camera to some of the fringes and the outside here, we can see that there is actually an area out here specifically designed for either high mobility characters like Spider-Man or flyers to get from one side of the map to the other with very little stopping them. But these pocket fights, encouraging less of just straight up brawl with a whole team slamming into another team and more broken up 2v2s or 3v3s scattered throughout the map, doesn't just stop here as we move into the Celestial Codex and the last domination point of this map. First of all, just listen for a second. That's cool. I love that. Let's do a quick fly through here as we can see how this map is designed. And again, you're starting to see this 3-lane philosophy happening here. This map takes the previous ideologies of long and unusual lines of sight for sniper or longer range type of characters and takes it to the extreme. There are some really strange off angles that a good player might be able to snag kills on. Ranges that most enemies will not be able to notice you from that circle around the main domination point, meaning that even if you're trying to control that space, you're likely not going to want to stay on the zone itself to do so because it's dangerous. And I think that's the main point that they're trying to change here. Instead of making it all of one team clashing against all of another team where everyone's funneling through one small choke point, this is much more open, like a battlefield, than every other map that we've seen thus far. Again, we see the use of the caves and the symbiotic elevators, which are much different than what we've seen on the original Klyntar map. Fun fact, I found a way to get stuck here when I went back through with Phoenix. Don't stand on this. This will get you stuck, and it's basically like a respawn, or you'll have to beg for your team. I wasn't able to get out here. Just like we saw with the first map, there's very little that's breakable here, and the stuff that is breakable, surprise, surprise, opens up more lines of sight. But not a new line of sight, it extends the line of sight that was already present. Again, something that we don't see really present in any of the other maps. Once again, holding on to the principle that the map isn't changing all that much, something that I think was a major point of feedback from players, and instead is adapting with the flow of the fight. I'm excited to get to play this map more earnestly, and if you are too, do me a favor and subscribe as we're trying to reach 50k. Bless your faces and deuces.